Hi, this is Mike Ignatoski, the creator of GreenFox, the spreadsheet that uses Excel programming to make it behave like an electronic baseball score sheet or scorebook, and it automatically computes the game stats, which can be a big time saver. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you find this video helpful. In this video, I like to demonstrate how to use the custom player ratings feature within GreenFox for both batters and pitchers, as well as the position list when playing in a league mode setup. Specifically in this demonstration, I'm using uh, replaying a team season for the 69 Mets, so this is HTS, historical team season mode, but the demonstration is valid for either historical team season or historical league season, whichever one you want to do. So let's see how to do that. So to begin with, I want to move over from the league sheet over to the master player list sheet. If you remember, the master player list is the unique list of all the players in your league. So in my situation, it's going to be everybody that played in 1969. And once I'm here, I want to focus on this help blurb in the upper right, which talks about these custom player rating fields. And the main point it makes here is if you want to use any custom player rating or data, you should first decide which columns or fields you want to track, and you need to configure them on the config sheet. So that's really what I want to point out here, is that first you need to configure them on the config sheet. So let's jump over to the config sheet and carry on from here. So here we are on the config page, and I've decided for my league situation, my Stratomatic 69 Mets, for the batters, I'm going to track two attributes or custom ratings for them, which is one is their running, their speed, and the other one is their arm, if they're the throwing arm, if they're a catcher or an outfielder. So I'm going to kind of track those two things for batters, and for the pitchers, I want to track their what I'm going to call their role, which is whether they're a strict starter, a strict reliever, a reliever starter, or more a starter reliever. Those are in Stratomatic, those are the options you get on pitching cards. And the other thing I want to keep track of for pitchers is their point of weakness, kind of like a fatigue factor of how long they can pitch without the possibility of becoming fatigued or weak. And so that's what I'm going to use for my second rating for pitchers, is that point of weakness. And I want to reiterate that although I'm talking in kind of Stratomatic terms and some things, that these ratings are very generic and can be whatever you want them to be for your game and your league setup. So to do this, there's a lot of instructions here, but I'm going to kind of just jump to it. You can read them. Is that to make these work for the batters, I'm going to put X's in these first two above the A and the B because I want to use two different ratings. And my labels for what my ratings are going to be, as I said, one is going to be, I'm going to call it run, or their running rating. Maybe I'll call it speed. And in their second one, as I mentioned, I was going to use their arm. So I'm just going to call that arm, just like that. Those are my labels. And down here for the pitchers, same thing. You put X's in as many columns as you want to use, and then above them, you write your labels. So my pitching, I was going to use the roll as one of them, and this fatigue factor, but I'm going to call it for Stratomatic this POW, point of weakness. So once I do that, I'm going to put these labels in here, and then I'm going to click either one of these. It doesn't really matter now because I've configured both of them. I'm going to click that, and it's going to say, hey, I just did the batters. Do you want to update the pitchers too? And I'll click yes because I configured both of those. And now it says it did it, and if I'm in league play, which I am, it should have updated these other sheets as well. So let's take a look at that. So now if we look at our score sheet, we can see we have these two new columns here in the lineup for both the speed and the arm. And up here, it shows the new labels for these pitcher ratings, the role and the point of weakness. And if we look at the home team score sheet, it looks the same. And also, if we now look at the master player list sheet, we'll see that in the batter and pitcher info rating columns area, it has these same labels for consistency. Same as on the rosters, it now shows them. And also, if we looked at the LG subs, which is the sheet used for league play bench players and bullpen, if we look here, the same labels are here: speed and arm and the point of weakness and the role. So that's how that works as far as setting up those labels. Now let's get back to the master player list to take the next step. Now we're back on the master player list sheet. We've completed step 1 up here, which is configure these custom columns, labels for batters and pitchers, and now what we need to do is enter the data for our players. I'm focusing on the 69 Mets, so how do I do that? I could scroll down to find the Mets, but what I want to do is hover on this team ID cell where it gives me this tip, and basically it says if you want all the players that played for a team, you need to click on that team ID to show those players, because otherwise you'll only get the players that started out on that team, but not any players that were traded to that team during the season. And that's what this is saying. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down here, scroll down to find these New York National Mets. I'm going to click on this team ID, and then it'll go through and find all the players that played for the Mets that year, which is mostly the people that played for them all year, but it also includes guys like Don Clendenin, who started with the Expos and finished with the Mets, or this Jim Gosker, who started with Seattle Pilots and ended up on the Mets. So that's how you get your list of players to work with. So now we're ready to enter the data for the players. And I first want to mention this positions column, which is right here, which is something else I want to enter in addition to the speed, the arm, the role, the point of weakness. This positions, as I hover on this, it'll give me this little pop-up help text. But what it says is basically this is totally optional, and it's just a way to list positions that a player is eligible to play. Now in Stratomatic, which is the example I'm following, each player card has a list of what their possible positions that they can play. So everybody can't play every position. So I want to know that when if I got to make a substitution, I want to know who's allowed to play that position. So I'm also going to be filling in this field. So let's get started with that. Let's start with Don Clendenin. According to my Stratomatic cards, he can play first base, so he can play left field, and that's it. And his speed, which in Stratomatic is from 1 to 20, is a 14, and your arm, which is a +2, which is pluses are bad and minuses are good. So that's how I would enter Don Clendenin, and I would just keep on going to the next player and do the same thing. So let me just jump ahead and we'll get back to this. Okay, fast forward a bit. I've entered all my player ratings and position information for my 69 Stratomatic Mets. Let's just look at a couple things. In the position column, you can see I entered these as not using position numbers, but basically letters. And I did that intentionally just because I find it easier to read on the substitution form and not as confusing with all the other numbers. But you could enter this however you want. If you want to use position numbers as opposed to 1B or LF, that's up to you. Also, for the players that like here that don't play the outfield or don't catch, they don't have an arm rating, so I just left it blank. Players like Kevin Collins and Deffy Dyer, in the position field I put NC because that stands for no card. in Stratomatic world, if they don't make a card for every player. So if I don't have a card for that player, I put NC, and that way I know that I won't substitute them in because I can't. I don't have their card, so I can't play them. So that's what that's indicating there. And down here we get to the pitchers. I don't fill in the position field here because it doesn't really make much sense to. But over here in the role and the point of weakness, that's what I filled in, which is S stand for primary starter, secondary reliever. So, and then the point of weakness, I enter in outs. So this would be this primary starter. Their point of weakness is 7 innings, so that's 21 outs. For a reliever, it's 4 innings, which translates to 12 outs. That's just how I ended it for my situation, but the details of what they are doesn't really matter. It's just how to do it in general. And so the same kind of thing, if I don't have a Stratomatic card for them, I put NC for no card. And for their running speed, I did put in a 10 for all of them. That's kind of a generic speed for pitchers. Some games have specific speeds for pitchers. Even Stratomatic does now, but in the old days, they didn't. But anyway, so that's how to enter in your data for your custom columns, pitchers, batters, and positions. Okay, now that we have entered all our data, we're ready to copy it over to the roster sheet. Before I do, I want to mention that I did screw up here on this Jim Gosker. I treated him like he was a pitcher, but he's actually a hitter. If I look at this primary role as a hitter, so I don't have a card for him either way, so I corrected that. So let's go up here. Now we're ready to copy these over to the roster sheet, and I'm going to just click this button here to do that. It gives me a little warning that it could take a couple seconds or more. I'm going to do that. And really all it's doing is just copying what we entered over onto the roster sheet. And the roster sheet, as I mentioned, differs from the master player list because everybody who played for every team is listed here. And really what it comes down to is the players that played for multiple teams are listed on each team that they played for on the roster sheet. So here, we can see Don Clendenin is listed here as a Met, whereas on the master player list he's listed as an Expo. But here he'll be on both the Expos and the Mets. But either way, here's the information now on the roster sheet. It's just like we entered it on the master player list sheet. So this is really just confirmation. And the reason that I have the roster sheet is that it is the roster sheet that is the source that is used when you're playing your game. When it makes your lineup, it looks at the roster sheet to see what these ratings are, not the master player list. So in theory, you could have something different for Don Clendenin could have different ratings or something for his Expos or his Met, but you'd have to change it here on the roster sheet. But for the most part, I think that's really not the main point. The main point is that it just makes it easier to only enter it once, and it'll copy it to both places if a player had played for multiple teams. One more thing I want to mention on this master player list custom data thing is back here I made one more change, which is for players I don't have a card for, in addition to the NC in the position column, I also put it into the speed column. And I did that for my different batters, and then I copied it over to the roster sheet. So now I'm ready to actually use this. Okay, so let's take advantage of all this work and see how this gets used during a game situation. So let's go over to the score sheet and set up to play the next game. So we'll click the game ID. It bumps us to the schedule sheet, tells us to choose the game ID. We'll pick game number 8 here. And as soon as I click that, it populates the lineups, and you can see here for the Mets, now these speed and arm ratings that we entered are now included in the starting lineup, so easy to see. Down here for the Phillies, which we didn't enter any of their data, there's our blank. But we can see the starting pitcher for the Mets down here, Gary Gentry. his role and point of weakness data are listed here. So that's how that helps out. If we look at the starting lineup for the Mets, we'll see batting fifth, playing third is Amos Otis, and his speed is NC. And this is why I put the NC in for the speed, so we could detect right off the bat that, hey, they have a guy in their starting lineup that I don't have a card for, so I need to do something here. So what I'm going to do is take advantage of this GreenFox 2.0 feature of swapping out starters. I'll click on his name, Amos Otis, and it says, do you want to choose a replacement for Amos Otis? I say yes. Now it brings up the substitution window, and if I look here, my third base options are Ed Charles, Wayne Garrett, and Al Weiss. I'm going to choose Wayne Garrett for no real specific reason, but you can see here I know that he can play third, and it also says that his running rating is 14. So I'm going to identify Wayne Garrett, say OK, and it swaps him into the starting lineup like that. Then if I want to go look at the sub list, if I go to this LG sub sheet for league games, this is the bench and the bullpens. You can see here, here's my Mets bench now, and Amos Otis is now on the bench. You can see here, oh, I forgot to enter the speed for Jim Gosker. But anyway, so this is what my bench looks like for the Mets. You know, the Phillies, they don't have any information, but the bullpen has all the other information we entered for those Mets pitchers. So that's how that information can be used to get your starting lineup and to make substitutions. The last piece I want to show in this video is the relief pitcher or pitcher substitution form. So let's say here we are, this game now, it's the bottom of the seventh, and Gary Gentry got pinch hit for us, so let's bring in a reliever. So if I click on the change pitcher, it shows the bullpen for the Mets. You can see here now is where it shows the info that we entered, or I entered at the beginning, so I could see who's eligible to relieve here. You know, I wouldn't want to pick somebody who's not capable of being a reliever. So here I might just pick Cal Kuntz to come in and pitch. And this also tells me his point of weakness, which would be 12 outs or 4 innings worth. So with that, I'll just change pitchers, and now it puts Cal Kuntz up here in the pitching cell, as well as puts his role and point of weakness in here as he replaced Gary Gentry. So that wraps up how to use the custom player ratings and positions for players in a league situation, and how you could use that to help you out in making substitutions for both batters and pitchers during the game and before the game with your starting lineup. Thanks for watching. Well, that wraps up this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found it informative and helpful. Please feel free to leave me some comments and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to be alerted when I post new videos. I hope that the GreenFox spreadsheet will save you time in keeping score and doing the game stats of your games, resulting in giving you more time to play the games that you want to play.